Thank you, Marco. So, who here in the audience knows Depop?
Great, not bad. But maybe a better question would have been who here in the audience has a teenage kid at home? A bit more. You probably don't want to know how much time and money they spend on Depop. But given that this is a finance crowd, you may want to know how much money they can be making on Depop. But in all seriousness, what is Depop and who we are? We're the community-driven fashion platform for the next generation. Very simply put, it's a peer-to-peer marketplace for buying and selling cool and unique clothes. We will be having 11 million users this year, making 200 million in GMV, all transacted in-app. And I guess what's important to say about Depop and what's unique about Depop is that we're allowing our sellers to create and curate unique profiles through which they can become a brand on their own, and through which they can become these, we call them unexpected entrepreneurs. And back to my first question, how much money they can be making, our top seller last year, who is just about 20, made 300K out of her bedroom.
Wow. And I mean, obviously, the Generation Z isn't really in the room here looking around. What makes them special, in your opinion?
I really love that generation. I think they're really, really unique and very inspiring and fascinating. And they're also the majority of our user base. 70% of our users are 24 younger. I think they're very unique in the way they think, they consume, they use technology in their attitude towards working. And I think it's very interesting because that makes it also very difficult for some of the traditional brands to sort of talk to them and cater to them. So very simply put, back in 2000, a teenager, a dream summer job for a teenager would have been Abercrombie & Fitch, internship where they could, get a discount, and they'd be probably dying to buy this brand. Now this next generation, what we see is they're all about starting their own business. I think for me, what's one of the most inspiring thing is when I ask our sellers why they Depop, and one of the most common answer would be because they want to make something of themselves. Actually, by some measure, 70% of the next generation is self-employed. They have these side hustles, and they're just quitting these kind of traditional summer jobs. So I think the difference is this attitude towards working that is really kind of much more focused towards the side hustle. And then on the other hand, the way they consume is also different. They don't want to be dictated by big brands, what to buy and what to consume. They are really all about getting something unique and authentic, ideally something with a very authentic story, and ideally that story being told by their peers, because that's somebody they can really trust. Now, when you take industry lens into it all and think about fashion, you see that fashion is still very much of an exclusive club, not allowing for these dynamics to really naturally evolve, and that's where Depop comes in place. So we allow sellers to, become their own little brands, making fashion their passion and their side hustle, and buyers to discover something very unique and with a very authentic story.
I mean, what I found impressive is always that Depop, you say it's a marketplace, but it's actually a community. How did that come about?
So I guess I need to go back to the very beginning. Depop was founded by Simon Beckerman, who is an Italian entrepreneur. He started and co-founded a magazine called PIG, P-I-G, fashion and culture-focused magazine, as well as Retro Super Future sunglasses. And both of these businesses were very strong community-driven businesses, and he comes from a very strong community-driven background. He was actually in the early days of the streetwear and sneaker community that's just become a big hype. It also means that he's not the youngest, but he's not in the audience, so he wouldn't mind me saying that. And that basically, he brought that community to the very beginning, to the very heart of what Depop is about, and it indeed is. Depop is communities in everything we do.
But I mean, coming from an investment perspective, obviously it's great to have 10 million people, and you mentioned the GMV of 200 million, but what's the business impact of having a community like this?
Yeah, we get that question a lot. It's actually an amazing growth lever as well. So we do have dedicated programs that allow us to scale the community into a proper acquisition channel. Our community being our sellers and influencers, and we will be adding 4 million users into the customer base this year through these channels. The beauty of these channels, and as you say, you're an investor, is that they're extremely cost effective. Our customer acquisition cost is basically zero. They're authentic, which is extremely important for this next generation. Authenticity is everything, and authenticity needs to be in everything that you do. But another really nice thing about these channels is that they drive very relevant and very vested traffic that translates into beautiful cohorts and amazing conversion and retention rates.
Okay, and what's happening in the next 12 months?
So we've been growing quite nicely in the UK. This is still sort of majority of our business. Becoming really a go-to place for teenager in terms of sort of fashion and buy and sell and sort of marketplaces. We will continue focusing on the UK. It's been growing still 80% and more than that. But for us, the biggest challenge and the biggest, I mean, also exciting next step is the US. So already 40% of the new users are coming from the US. So as a leading indicator, this seems to be actually living up to the potential of the market. US is an amazing market in terms of the size, but also a bit more competitive. But there are two things that really excite us about the US. First and foremost, these community-driven acquisition channels do rely on social media dynamics that seem to be much stronger in the US than in the UK. Actually, an average seller in the US would drive twice as many new users onto the platform than average UK user. And the second thing that is exciting for us is that sort of the niche that we're carving for ourselves, which is the community-driven fashion and next generation, does not seem to be owned by anyone. And so we do see a big potential for us to replicate the success in the UK and just take it overseas.
Cool. And bonus question, since we have a bit of time left. I mean, I'm sure there's a number of startups in the audience, and I think it's impressive that a London-based company now will probably next year or something have majority of the revenue in the US. If there's entrepreneurs in the audience, what would you say have been your learnings? Because you beachheaded the effort for other companies going this path.
Yeah, so few things. I think one that is maybe, obviously it's a more competitive market. You may need to spend more money. You may need to invest more in brand. But I think for a specifically European companies, what I see the struggle, the biggest struggle is really starting to think global. When you have headquarters in London and UK is your biggest market, making your London people start thinking globally and start sort of prioritizing US is actually a massive cultural transformation that needs to take place. And probably, having some of the global functions over in the US, really kind of like changing the mindset has been actually surprisingly one of the biggest challenges, but also something we really focused on and really paid off. And I think, be ready to invest in brand and in marketing a bit more than what Europe would suggest.
Okay, cool. So if anyone here is ever in LA, go visit the Depop space.
LA or
it's
New York,
very cool.
actually.
Or in New York.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.